From Beyond Marketing, it's the 20-Minute Call, a podcast about the dreamers, boundary pushers, rebels, and champions of the skydiving industry. Each episode is a narrative journey highlighted by the highs, lows, and luck that the skydiving industry delivers, as told by the most influential people within the sport. If you've ever dreamed of becoming a skydiver, perhaps opening a drop zone, or becoming the next world champion, check out the 20-Minute Call hosted by me, James LeBarry. My guest today is considered by many to be one of the greatest skydiving aerial photographers and cinematographers in the history of the sport. Norman Kent made his first jump at 19 years old. Now at 68, he's still on top of the mountain, capturing the sport's most extraordinary images. At the time of this recording, the October 2024 cover of Parachutist Magazine is one of Norman's images. With over 30,000 skydives made with a camera, Norman has witnessed and documented skydiving's most extraordinary world records and beautiful moments. Some of these moments include capturing the Olympic rings formation jump made during the opening ceremonies of the 1988 Olympic Games. This jump was broadcast live to 1 billion people around the globe to over 160 nations. Norman's work has been published in prestigious magazines such as Time, Playboy, the Guinness Book of World Records, and Popular Photography. He has been part of blockbuster feature films such as Kingsman, XXX, and Godzilla. He has shot commercials for the world's largest brands, including Smirnoff, Coca-Cola, Visa, and Ford, to name a few. I'm so pleased to welcome a skydiving icon, mentor, and most of all, a thoughtful and warm human being, Norman Kent. Norman, welcome.
Well, hi there. Hi there. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's an honor and a privilege to speak with you. What a journey you have had in an extraordinary career. And if you don't mind, I'm going to dive right into a young Norman Kent, born in El Paso, raised in Mexico with your 3 siblings. Can you tell me and give us some insight about growing up in Mexico?
Well, obviously for me, that was just a normal thing. I mean, I was raised there. My mother was a Spanish refugee from the eras of Francisco Franco, and my father was American. And I really consider myself to be a Mexican. That's one of the things I'm always emphasizing, and that's just because my first 20 years of my life lived in Mexico, and I feel like I have like more of a Latin heart than anything else. There's just a different kind of spice, let's say, to things. The Latin Latin feel than it is in the U.S. So that's why I consider myself to be a Mexican. Actually, my son asked me the other day why, and I really couldn't quite answer the question, because I mean, even though my first 20 were in Mexico, I'm now 68. So the majority of my life has been in the United States. So it makes absolutely no sense to do that. But to me, I think it's just because, the early years are always the developing years in a lifetime. So it was great living at home with my siblings and stuff, and the normal thing. And it was, for me, I was, I grew up with a lot of turmoil as far as I was always in trouble. That I was that kind of a child, always in trouble and always going above the law kind of thing, and getting in all kinds of trouble. But I think it was great, and I love Mexico. All of my family's still there, cousins, and my siblings are all still alive. My parents have both passed, but the rest of the family still lives there, and I love visiting, going back there, so it's awesome.
Were you much different than your siblings?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's more than anything else, I was the troublemaker, and I needed more attention than anybody else. And I was always, I don't know, I just remember doing wacky things, I remember I must have been being a total brat. I'm trying to think, probably I was 10 years old or something, being a total brat in the car with my siblings. And I don't know what I was doing, but they finally were like, we're tired of you and we're just going to leave you. So they just pushed me out of the car and left me in the street. And this is like in the big Mexico City, and then just kind of went off to drive around the block. And I'm going like, okay, great. So I went and hid and watched them come back and look for me, and I was just watching the scene of them looking for me, like all worried that I had disappeared, And so those are the kind of things that I would do, just kind of go like, okay, now I'm just going to get back at them. And I just hid behind the bush for a little bit and watch them look for me until I finally popped up, and they were just furious. Obviously my parents, just things like that. And I was also, I always seemed to need more attention than anyone else. I have always been in a feeling that I was weird and didn't quite fit in. That was my default when I was a kid. Just kind of between my birth defects and things like that, I just kind of felt weird and felt like I wasn't normal, kind of thing. But I think it's not much different than any other childhood. But I was definitely different than them in that respect. Yeah.
You mentioned your birth defects at this year's Hall of Fame induction, your ceremony. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You actually referenced this, and you actually had a video that I felt was so artistic that you shared with that audience that evening, and you highlighted your birth defects. And I thought, wow, that is so vulnerable and honest to put it out there. And I had great admiration for that. Will you talk about the birth defects and what, how that was for you, feeling different as you've described?
Yeah, sure. I'll be happy to. The original idea came because not the format, but the making a video was because there was always trouble with controlling the amount of time a speaker would stay up there and speak. They were always trying to control the time. In a previous presentation, the previous year that I did a presentation, not being inducted, but just a presentation that I did, I wanted to do it live, but we compromised on the format of video because it was an easier way to control the time, to really know how long it was going to take to complete the presentation. One of the things I really enjoyed about that format was that at the end, it's not just the 500 people in the room, however many are in there, that get to see this, but you can actually, now have it online to share and so on. So I really like that idea. So this year, what I thought was, hey, one way to control how much time I'm going to be up there, which I'm limited to 5 minutes with, is do a video presentation. And I also, just like the previous year, I thought, even though 5 minutes is a short time, it also allows me to do an expanded version for the rest of the world that was not there that evening, and do a more artistic form of video, something that's not as rapid fire me talking kind of thing. So that was the idea on the video. Now, as far as the format and why I started that way is because, the format or the main thing was to talk about what I want to be acknowledged for in the world, what I want to be recognized for, what I feel my contributions were. And I kind of felt a little bit like, okay, well, who am I to be saying that? It's like, oh, I did this and I did that. It's like, well, that's like you talking about yourself kind of thing. But they insisted that no, that was the format, that's your opportunity to go up there and say, this is what I want acknowledged for. And I wasn't sure how I wanted to start it. I had trouble in my entire life with this, feeling weird and I don't fit in. And it all started with, as a child, when you have physical differences, people make fun of you, other kids make fun of you and things like that. And I also have been very much in an inquiry of really trying to practice self-love instead of trying to fit into what other people think. I had a very toxic relationship before that was everything was about me trying to have the other person love me, the other person accept me. And I learned a lot about myself. And one of the things that I learned was that I really needed to be happy with me and really needed to be indulging in self-love and in self-acceptance before I could really progress any further in this lifetime. So I'm at that time in my life. So I thought to myself that to start standing there, it was actually a shot that that, it starts with me naked. And it's just basically saying, I'm not a perfect, and I was saying I'm not a perfect being. And I started stating all of my birth defects and, limitations, imperfections of body, and also got into other imperfections as a person. And I felt that was also almost speaking to myself. It was a way to go, hey, this is who you are. This is everything you are, and this is everything you've accomplished, and anything anybody admires you for includes this. It's not, a trying to get rid of this or trying to hide this or trying to overcome this. It's like, this is a part of it. This is a part of who you are. And maybe this has helped you in some way, in some form of motivation to really, be who you are today, and to achieve the achievements that you have achieved. So it was really important. And again, it was like I was listening to myself in the video, and I was talking to myself like, this is me, this is who I am, and in a sort of in a self-embrace and self-love, and the other part about it, and it was a very important message, because it was also finding perfection within the imperfections. So it's not like you are imperfect because you have these defects or you have these limitations. This is just the physical limitations are just a subject to talk about. But I mean, it can be anything. It could be, other limitations and other flaws that you can consider them. It is those things that make you who you are. So in the package of perfection, let's say, perfection of who we are as a being, those imperfections are a part of that. So that's what I was really trying to achieve. It was like hey, I am imperfect, but that is part of it. And the perfection that I speak of, let's say, comes with an acknowledgement and an embracing of those imperfections. So it was kind of a really an understanding of that. It's like, hey, I am just this way. And if I just embrace who I am, as a perfect being just this way, then all those other things kind of dissolve in it, and it's a more powerful place to stand. So that was kind of a message that I wanted to pass on to people, by leading by example, let's say, by doing that, So that was the idea.
If you're a DZO or DZM listening to this podcast and you're not using Burble, I've got a question. Why not? If the reason is price, what's the cost of your time? Other booking and manifest softwares are a one-size-fits-all. Burble was built from the ground up by a DZO for DZOs to maximize efficiency. Now, isn't that nice? There's no software that compares. Choose Burble. Burble. As you mentioned, if you are actually naked, and we can see what you're referring to as you narrate. I think that your hand and your chest are somewhat underdeveloped. I have to imagine to put yourself out there like that had to be very freeing as you work through self-love. But going back into your childhood, where you don't have that maturity or wisdom, I imagine it would have been a time of feeling very self-conscious and, aware of this, particularly as kids are.
Yes. I think, yeah, it is. You don't quite, I think as a child, it's more of a trauma. And then what happens is you end up designing the being that you're going to be based on those incidents. And also you start going like, okay, I guess I'm weird and I don't fit in. And that becomes your default, like I said before. Or you go like, hey, so if I'm weird and whatever, I'll show them. And then, and then you become something great at something, So that's what I'm saying is a lot of times those traumas and those limitations and the way you look at them as a child makes you design who you're going to be to prove to the world that you are great, and that's where competition is so important for people and all that. It's like, I can show them that I'm better than everybody else. And it all comes the same way. I mean, if you really look at the psychology of it, and I'm very familiar with it because I'm a professional patient, psychology patient. I've been through a lot of therapy and I really studied a lot of this. And so it's really interesting how we as children design who we're going to be. And a lot of the greatness that we become is because of that, is because we're trying to prove something or surpass something. So that's really important. And that's one of the reasons here as an adult, redesigning that design that was created as a child, then you get to go look at it and go like, yeah, hey, don't hide from this, embrace it. And as I enter a new era in my life, it's important for me to surpass that instead of being self-conscious about it, to go like, no, this is something that I am. At one point, I remember I was trying to pretend like, oh, I don't have any, there's no big deal. It's no big deal. And in the space, I know because through therapy, I was thinking, oh, it's anything you have. Like if you have a minor thing, you go like, it's no big deal. That's no big deal, right? I mean, you can surpass that. And in the it's no big deal, I was trying to pretend that I didn't really have any limitation. And I remember being, participating in a trapeze act, one of those where guests of a resort can join the trapeze artist, and they teach you how to do this trap. And I was like I was really having a hard time hanging on to the trapeze because of the limitation of my hand. And I was really confused. I was going like, how can I pretend this is not affecting me when it is, when I can't hang on. It's like, and that, in therapy, I worked out, the distinction between, it's not that that there's nothing, that there's no limitation. It's like, you do have a limitation, you do have a problem, but it's no big deal that you have a problem, which is very different than ignoring the problem. And a funny analogy with that is that I've been in a lot of trouble like that in the sport, and people don't realize it, because most people, I mean, look at you in the eyes and perhaps, they can't tell. I've had people that have known me for years and they're like, I never noticed that you had a smaller hand or whatever. What I'm trying to get at is that it's affected me in the sport quite a bit. I've been in situations where, they put me out there and they're like, okay, well, you just hang on with one hand and wave at the other plane that we're ready to go or something, And I'm like, dude, it's like, you're asking me to hang on with the hand that I don't have, you know what I mean? Because my hand doesn't have the grip. So hanging out there it's not the same. And the same thing when I'm climbing out really slow, and people are like, they get really annoyed that I'm climbing out slow. And my point to the organizers is like, how about you just put the green light 3 seconds earlier and give me an extra 3 seconds or 5 seconds, instead of going, Norman's just too slow getting out. It's like, why don't we just give Norman an extra 5 seconds and cut him some slack, huh? You know what I mean? And, getting out of the airplane, between the big helmet and the fact that my right hand is going to go out there for a grip that it can't really hang on to, and I have to make that transition of letting go of the left hand to really climb out. It takes a little extra time. And so it's affected me in the sport, and I've just dealt with it. But it is something that people don't realize. And anytime I get into this, I'm like, they have no clue that I'm even struggling with just hanging on there. It's like it's not a normal thing. But like I say, going back to the video, it's the important message there was really to embrace that. It's like, hey, let go of this as a limitation or as a trying to overcome it, and embrace it as, hey, something that you are, and it's proudly part of your design from divine, let's say, So that was an important part of my development and where I'm going to next, because I think also the point is that I'm really trying to share my stories, my insights, and my growth with the community through these little videos and through these little stories, and in this case through this podcast, because that's what I want to do. That's what I want to be in the world, stands for, being an inspiration to other people. And if I can be an inspiration through my own growth, my own personal journey, and hopefully, because we are all human and we all have similar journeys or similar struggles internal in our heads, that hopefully I can inspire others to really have the courage to look through those those things and find value in embracing rather than running away from things like that. And it's taken me this long to actually be able to go, hey, here I am, naked in front of the camera going, this is how I'm built. I'm, too short here, too long there. I have this limitation. And then go from there. And so it was a really important part of my life to do that.
Particularly in the earlier generations of skydiving, but it's a very male-dominated sport, and there's a little bit of a machismo that you would find at many drop zones, and I don't want to say that's necessarily negative, but it makes it more difficult to be vulnerable and to say, this is me. And also the irony of what you're saying to me is so much of what we try to do in life is so performance-based. But when you strip off literally all the clothes going, this is me, and it's enough. And the crazy thing is there's so much admiration for that courage, because we'll all put our best selves out there,
right? But
to put your raw self out there,
right,
which is just the most simplest thing to do. It's not a simple thing to do mentally, but physically, just going, here I am. Whew, that's got to be that's so bold and brave, but also that does so much for those that are going, wow, what the great Norman Kent has been feeling in terms of insecurity in his life, I deal with. And suddenly you become very relatable, and also just going, I left there going, wow, that as someone who has their own insecurities, to be able to go, wow, that was bold. I don't know if I'd have the guts to do that. I wish I had the guts to do that. I really admired you for that, Norman. I thought it was a beautiful creative expression, and very bold to put yourself out in front of all your peers and be vulnerable. Awesome.
Thank you. And I think that's, I know we're spending a lot of time on that, but and there will be eventually a link to that video. I want to finish the expanded version first, but I think the important thing there is that it was also in a moment where you are being honored. So you are being looked at as great, like you say, as the great Norman Kent. So why would you kind of do that? Why would you do, hey, this is me here, and kind of start pulling some, pointing at negative things or what would seem to be negative or whatever. But I think that was exactly the best, the reason for it. It was like, hey, this is really who I am. This is this person that you admire, that it doesn't take, what I'm about to say doesn't take away any of my accomplishments. It doesn't take away anything you admire of me. It just puts me in a more, like you say, more relatable space. It was very much, like I say, it was done for myself as much as anything else. And there's no, the actual, the working title of the video actually does say the word raw, Norman Kent raw. And that's exactly what it was meant to be. So you can't go any more raw than just standing in front of the camera naked. It was, I used that Da Vinci drawing before that and dissolved from it and used the kind of try to be in the same pose as that drawing, because that the perfect man, a drawing of the perfect man. And, it wasn't like I was comparing myself to that. On the contrary, I was kind of going, okay, this is the perfect man. Well, here it is. Here's me, and this is not the perfect man, And so that was a good transition that way. So if you think about it, it's a moment where you could play the social media hiding game. In other words, I'm great here and I'm do that. Look at me doing this, and look over here and look at me being great, which is what social media tends to do. You rarely put yourself in social media in a vulnerable, negative state, and you actually brag about the good times you're having, or the accomplishments, or all the other things. And that's what people want to see. If you start something negative, people actually go like, we don't want to see that in social media, So it's an opportunity when you're being honored to just kind of go, yeah, look at me, look how great I am, and to pretend that those things are not there. But if you actually have the courage to just start from scratch and go, hey, this, part of what I wanted to be acknowledged is for going through that, and for, becoming who I am, even through those limitations, because again, the idea is to inspire others. And that's what I'm trying to do. What I stand for in the world, and who I am is the possibility of love, courage, and creativity. And I think in that case, all of that was combined. There was a love for myself, a love for life, and everyone else in my community and in the world, and the courage to stand there and really put myself in a raw state and doing it in a creative way, which is, the reason for doing this on video, which I didn't quite state earlier, is because that's my best form of expression. So how could I instead there start talking and doing the normal format when I express myself better through video? And that's why I chose to do that instead of talking. So, which normally I love to talk, and of course I was talking in the video, but this was like I just stood there and said, okay, instead of talking, I'm going to show you this video, and relinquished my 5 minutes of talking to show this video and express myself that way. So yeah, it was awesome. I really feel great about doing that, and I'm glad it was well received by everyone.
If you're a fan of the 20-Minute Call, I'd like to personally invite you to become a member of a budding community on Patreon. By becoming a patron of the show, you can join me behind the scenes to discuss options for future guests, chat about things we've already heard, and gain access to some show swag. Details on how to become a patron can be found in the show notes. I'd love for you to join me. Okay, on with today's show. One of the key aspects of your life was going on jungle expeditions to visit the Lacandon Indians. Your intent was to live with these Indians, and you did when you were 16 years old for about 3 months. What was your attraction to doing this, and what did you learn living with such a remote tribe of people at such a young age, such a formative time?
Yeah, my trip to the jungle, it's like it really is an important event in my life. I was 14 years old, and at that time of my life, I was just doing crazy adventures and things, just whatever seemed out there. And like I said before, I was a bit of a troublemaker. This particular adventure, it was dangerous, but to me, it was like I was not afraid of anything at that age, and it was actually just a group of 3 of us. I was 14, my other friend was 14, and another one was 18 years old. And we decided we wanted to go have this adventure. I don't remember why we thought that was a good idea, but the idea was to live with the Indians and actually try to help them. We were bringing supplies and medicine. My grandfather was a doctor, so we asked for all kinds of samples, even simple stuff like, pain relief and, just all kinds of different medicines and for various things. And I played a little bit with, I like being the doctor or whatever in any kind of camping trips we were going to or whatever. So I was always into that. And so we wanted to bring supplies and things that they might not have that they could use and live with the Indians and learn about them and so on. It was just a crazy idea that we had. And when we got there, it was really a wild experience because there was all kinds of political reasons why we shouldn't have been there, and they didn't know what our intentions were, and so it was really confusing. They didn't speak Spanish, So I mean, we're in Mexico. They didn't speak Spanish. They had their own dialect, and so we're they're the Mayan descendants, and we're deep into the jungle border with Guatemala, and so it was quite an interesting experience. But one of the things that I got from it was the simplicity of their world, and it was just a unique, beautiful people and beautiful, simple way of life that really attracted me. We were not there very long. We were there for only a couple of weeks, and things got really bad. The older kid got sick. Later on, we learned that he had malaria, but at the time he was just sick with, with a fever and just in bad shape. And so we decided, as much as I wanted to play doctor, I didn't know what I was doing, obviously. And we decided we needed to get him out of there. So we needed to leave. And we had no way, we hadn't really planned how we were going to get out or whatever. So we started, with the help of our host, who guided us through like half a day of walking, pointed us in the right direction, and so if you just kind of keep going. in this direction, you can make it to civilization. There was no trails or anything like that because the jungles just grow so quickly, and it's also there wasn't people hiking in and out or anything like that. Just the jungle, the tribe, and then the civilization 75 kilometers out. So we just started walking and, opening our way with a machete and all that. And, we just got lost. We were lost for 3 days, hallucinating from lack of food and lack of rest. And we had learned enough to know that there's some things were poisonous, even some places where you thought you had fresh water wasn't fresh water. And there was just so we were like afraid to touch anything or do anything. And we were just over our heads, completely over our heads. And, like I say, we started hallucinating. I was the first guy to hallucinate was the older boy. And he was sick. So it seemed normal. And then my friend started running around crazy, asking us to help him. He was chasing a chicken. And we were like, oh no. So he was hallucinating chickens. And then I started getting in a frenzy, like trying to get us out. And I hallucinated that I had found this highway, and I started like, okay, we're out. And I just kept opening with the machete and then just realized that no, there was nothing there. So we just kept pushing. I kind of took the lead at that point as much as possible. And I don't know through what miracle we found our way out. We ended up in a little clearing, and there was this Indian there, more civilized than the Nakandons, and he was like, "What in the hell are you guys doing here?" And so he fed us and helped us, took us out of there and helped us find our way out to civilization. So we ended up getting my friend to the hospital and all that. And the point I'm trying to get at is I felt incomplete. I felt like it was we didn't do what we set out to do. And that was the moment where I became a photographer. To me, it was like, although I had a little camera with me, I didn't feel like a photographer. But at that point, I was like, I really want to capture what was in there. And I really want to go back there and complete the mission and what was, what we set out to do, as well as capture that and share it with the world. So then I prepared for a couple of years, just recovered from that, bought a couple of cameras, used cameras, movie and still cameras, and then, went back in there. This time, these two guys were not interested in going back there, so I ended up going. I had met a girl, so we ended up going back there together. And this time it was a successful expedition. It's a really long story, and someday I'll make a little documentary about it because I have all the material. Just to shorten the story, we found our way back in to the same guy, that hosted us before. He hosted us, and we were there for almost 3 months, and really, did a lot of shooting with a movie camera and still camera, and really did what we set out to do the first time. And it was a wonderful experience, and that really solidified my interest in photography, especially because I had now shot this, and when I came out of there, I actually made a documentary. It's a very, very homemade, non-professional, although I thought I was making it professionally. When I look at it now, it's like, wow. But it was a documentary that I completed. So it really solidified my interest in photography. And the motivation for my photography was always to share the beauty that I see, to capture and share the beauty that I see. And that, that became my mission in life. So that was the importance of that trip. I think I just matured as a man, and instead of just going for crazy adventures, I found a passion. I found something to really follow. And then, the obvious thing for me was when I found skydiving, which was, again, just something I wanted to try once, like most of us. I ended up combining the two to be able to share the beauty that I see in skydiving with the world. And that's what I've been doing for 49 years now, so it's hard to believe it's been that long, but it's quite the trip. So that's how my photography started. And that was the importance of that trip.
Yeah. I didn't want to overlook that experience because I've heard you reference it several times. It's certainly been documented. And though it was, when you were 14, when you first went there, and then 16 again for the 3-month period, I mean, it seems like that was a very critical moment in your development. I have to ask, though, how is it that your parents were okay with you going into the jungle for 3 months with a very remote tribe?
I don't think they were, it's not that they were okay, it's that their attitude was, you're crazy and we can't seem to stop you. So it's like, we don't, we quit trying to get in your way. Because that was like when you were asking me earlier about my childhood, that was basically I was always doing crazy stuff, getting in trouble, and was high maintenance, and they seemed to just take the attitude of like, we can't control this kid, so it was just like, let him run wild kind of thing. I don't know that was the right idea or not, but ironically enough, the first expedition, I wasn't clear at the time. Later on, I processed it, but a lot of these things I was doing for attention. You do these crazy things trying to get attention, but I didn't have an off button, so I wouldn't stop. It was not like I got the attention, then I stopped. It was more like, okay, I just keep going and going and going. So this was a clear example, because I remember clearly we were in the outskirts of, the small town away from Mexico City, close to the jungle, kind of like this is our last contact in civilization. And I remember a couple of different times while we were waiting there to go in, calling home and kind of telling them, this is it. I may not come back. Like, it may be the end of me. I have no idea what I'm going to find. And in the back of my mind, I was hoping they would go, don't be stupid. You've proven your point. Just come home. Okay. And I don't know what I would have done, but part of me was hoping they would do that. They would say that, so I could go, okay, then I'll just come home, and just not go through with it. Because I was afraid, I was afraid of what could happen. We had no clue what we were getting into. And it's not like, okay, I know what I'm doing. It's more like, hey, we think this is a great idea and we're doing this, but we have no idea what we're going to find. So, as it was, we did find nothing but trouble, so, there was cause to be afraid. And so, and their reaction was like, okay, well, thanks for letting us know, and good luck, and I was like, shit, now I got to do it, so it was one of those things where, so I don't know that that by then I had already carved a stop where they just didn't even try to stop me, where even when I was hoping they would, they weren't stopping me anymore. So I kind of felt like, oh man, now I got to go through with it, because otherwise it's like, why'd you plan all this and come all the way here just to the edge of the jungle just to turn around and go back? You can't even blame it on them. Like, well, they wouldn't let me, stuff like that. It was so now, like, damn it, now I got to go through with it. So I think it was more like that than them letting me,
It sounds like it was the best thing that could have happened, because you emerged from the jungle 3 months later, sounding like a different person.
Yeah, it's completely, and it is what shaped my entire life from there on. And it's one of the things I should add is that a lot of times people ask me what drives me, meaning what keeps me going. How could I have not gotten burned out over the years? The answer that I really have for that is precisely that it is this pure obsession with sharing the beauty that I see, capturing and sharing the beauty that I see. Skydiving just happens to be an exciting place to do that. But like, if people ask me, hey, wait a minute, you're having too much fun. You're not supposed to have two passions. You're either going to do skydiving or you're going to do photography. Let's say that was the case. And which one would you choose? I would choose photography, because photography is exactly what that represents. It's a form of expression of the beauty that I see, and an instrument for sharing that. Where skydiving is just I don't want to say just like it's less, but because I'm very passionate about it. But it's an arena to exercise. It's the subject to shoot, and there's a lot of reasons why I feel very attracted to skydiving that I can touch on. but it is not skydiving that drives me. It is the photography of it that does. And that's, I mean, that's one of the things that I struggle with today. I can feel changes in my life and in my career. A lot of what I'm doing needs to change as I get older. A lot of things will come to an end or need to shift. And part of that is I need to embrace what those changes are. And part of that is being consistent with that. Like, I feel, to be honest with you, I feel like I'm, and this is something that I rarely share because it's not something we get to the topic of it, but it is relevant to what we're talking now. So I'll be happy to share it, which is that I feel like I'm a little bit out of integrity, because I've always gone back to that default, which is, yes, I have a passion of capturing and sharing the beauty that I see. And yet in skydiving, although people may not think that about me, I feel like I'm out of integrity in the sharing part, because there are so many things like that little video and the induction ceremony and other things that are stories that I want to share, insights that led to beautiful images that deserve a story behind them on how they were captured or what the lesson was in the capturing of it. All those kind of stories that are part of my life and my growth, and I just never have time to share them. So I'm capturing a lot of beautiful images, and I'm growing in a lot of different ways, and seeing a lot of insights and a lot of, oh my God, this is like beautiful, and I should share this. But then there's like off to to training or trying to go to the next record or the next boogie or the next whatever. There's just events going on all over the world all the time, trying to stay current in various different disciplines. And I just feel like that I don't have time for sharing. So I feel like I'm capturing a lot more than I'm sharing. And that makes me feel a little bit out of integrity. And that is, one of the shifts that I may do someday. I may slow down in the capturing and kind of let the sport leave me behind, per se. You may see less of me being active that way, and spend more time on the sharing stuff. Some of the projects that I created 20 years ago, 30 years ago are coming to fruition now. And I say that only because now you can measure the impact they had in the sport. You can talk about those things. Now you can actually look back and go, hey, this was the intentional design. It wasn't just pointing the camera and capturing something. Oh, this is a cool shot. Look what I got, like out of nowhere. It's like, no, this was an intentional design that I had. And I'm going, this shot is going to start like this, and it's going to then do that. And then it's connected with this other shot, and it really have some kind of intentionality to it. And those things are beautiful to share, but I don't know when I'll ever have time for that if I don't slow down. And if you think about it, everything comes in cycles, life cycles, and everything, including life, obviously, so it can't be forever. Nothing can be forever. Nothing is, relationships. I mean, the basic one is life. Life is, we're all gonna die. We're all in transition. And even within our life, there's all these changes and all these waves that come and go. There's a rhythm to it. So it's impossible for me to think of me being in the sport forever, and if I keep doing the same thing, it's almost like a hamster in a wheel doing the same thing, and then pretty soon you run out of energy and you fall off the wheel, and I'm not sure that that's how I want to end my career. I may prefer to shift and be able to spend more time on the sharing and of older material and newer material and even new designs, and really have people know what I'm about. Just like in that video we started this podcast talking about, the video of the induction. So it's there's a lot more like that to be made and shared about my experiences and about my life, and perhaps even a documentary or something. So it's something that I think about a lot. It's like, how am I going to make that transition, and how, what happens there? People quickly forget, and I will no longer be on top of the world. And like this year, I have 3 or 4 parachutist covers And when we were counting covers just to put it in the verse of what I want to be acknowledged, I have over 150 covers and 115 over 115 two-page spreads. So that's a lot of material and stuff. And it's kind of hard to step off of that stage and go, okay, I'm not going to have any more. I think that what I need to look at is what I'm going to gain. If I do that, what I'm going to gain, meaning to be able to share some of the things that I haven't been able to share. So,
well, I think I speak on behalf of the community. We look forward to that transition because we want to see it. We know that we're only getting a sliver of what you have captured. But I also imagine that, does aging frustrate you, Norman? You sound very content. Well, this is life and there are cycles and there are rhythms, but you are still creating. You are still capturing. You don't seem to be slowing down. When I look at you physically, you look physically very healthy and you have very good perspective. So is it frustrating going, gosh, I suppose at some point I need to transition to this new phase of creative because potentially you're aging? Is that accurate? Is it a frustrating thing to age?
There's definitely the aging part. My body hurts like it didn't before, and the endurance. I think also one of the things that I've noticed the most is I used to learn so easy, and now it takes me forever to learn something. I'm like the worst in the wind tunnel, for instance, going in there and listening to my coach tell me what to do with my extremities to do something, and watching him roll his eyes back and going like, how many times am I going to have to tell this guy? And it's like, and I can't get my body to do it, and I have all these bad habits from so many years of flying, and no excuses. It's just I learned really slow. So that's one of the times when you realize, okay, it must be aging. And I'm not the best flyer out there. I know I duke it out with the youngsters and worlders and stuff, but I'm not by any means the best flyer out there. On the contrary, I'm probably the worst out there in the bunch, and what really drives my flying is that I know I'm driven by knowing where to be, by instinct, where to be and when to be in a certain place. And I end up finding myself quite often in the place where magical images are captured. And I think people scratch their head and go like, how in the hell did he know to go there? And a lot of times it's like, what jump was he on is what people tell me. Is like, what it doesn't even look like our skydive, because I'm focusing on something completely different than what the jumpers are. Of course, they have their hands full with just building a formation record or something like that. But my specialty is more, try to find the angle where you look the most beautiful in nature, so I can capture you and share with the world. So, and that's where my best flying is, when I'm really not thinking about flying and stuff. But it does pay, take a toll. And as far as the frustration, I don't think it's really that much of a frustration, because I've learned to really embrace like a lot of the things that I'm growing in, and like the stuff we were talking about in the video of my induction ceremony video presented, and all of that. And a lot of those things are very much the growth that I'm going through. So as you get older, you also get wiser and stuff. So I've learned to embrace those changes and embrace that perhaps it's my age that's allowed me to learn these lessons. And I'm not afraid to see that perhaps a certain lesson I had to be at this age before I could learn it. We were just talking earlier. It's like, I can't believe that it took me until age of 68 to actually embrace certain things like that and go like, hey, here, I'm going to put myself and embrace who I am with all my defects and everything, or my limitations. So, a lot of times age can be beautiful that way too. So there's a frustration from one side, because I do enjoy being on top of the world as far as on stage, and being admired and loved by everyone for the work that I do, and that perhaps will end. But I also look at it, it's almost like a rock star not being able to go on stage again. And what I've learned to look at it as is more like perhaps I'm just changing the stage or the arena that I'm going to be playing in. Perhaps I will be admired as an older human being for being able to live that life and to also transition into the new life, which could be again more in sharing what that life has brought as far as growth and lessons and all that. And I think primarily it's not what people think about me. It's like if I've learned so much and grown so much and lived so much, it would be a shame not to share it. Especially when that's my driving force. It's like sharing it with the world. So that makes it all worth it. It's any kind of frustration from aging, and it takes it into a different realm. I see sometimes people that are admired at older ages, in different arenas, different things. And sometimes the admiration comes from their age. Sometimes the admiration comes from, hey, look at them go at this age, or look at them transition at this age, or look at what they did. And so there is that. And the most important part of that is, who doesn't like admiration and all that? But I've also learned, as I mentioned before, that I had an addiction to that admiration, perhaps, and like in that toxic relationship I was mentioning before. I was doing anything and everything to be loved and be admired, and to the point where it wasn't healthy for me. I was losing myself, and that's when you learn that the self-love and self-admiration is where you really get to satisfy that need, and the rest of it is just more. It's just nice icing on the cake. And who doesn't love to be admired? Who doesn't enjoy that? But it's not something that you need to depend on, that you need to have. So as I grow older, that's one of the lessons I've learned, is to not need that so much and to find that more in myself, love and self-admiration. And therefore it makes it easier to not be frustrated, because growing older, it just means I get to be more in peace with that rather than not have it anymore,
It does. And for you to even share that, because it's what we all feel, but very few of us say or share out loud. And it's encouraging and brave, too, to be able to acknowledge, hey, I thrived on that attention. But again, coming back to self. This podcast is sponsored by Beyond Marketing, the digital marketing agency for the skydiving industry. Now, I'm not a fan of lots of ads during a podcast. Who likes ads? So I'll stop talking about how marvelously wonderful Beyond Marketing is. But if you're curious about what the amazing people of Beyond Marketing do to help drop zones and manufacturers thrive, then you should check out their website at dropzone.marketing. That's dropzone.marketing. Let's move forward. You mentioned, Norman, that you've had roughly 150 covers. Do you remember your very first cover shot for Parachutist Magazine?
I don't remember my first cover, to be honest with you. I'd have to look back and see which one it was. But I do remember my first published photograph. It was an important thing for me. It's interesting because I've never had a strategy. Just like going into the jungle, it's just like, they're just going to the jungle. Yay! Now you got to find your way out. So I've never been like, okay, if I do this, then they'll recognize me, and then they'll publish me, and then I'll do that, and then I'll be successful. And then, there was never a strategy to my life. It was just driven. All the decisions were driven by a passion that I have, like I mentioned before. And then the world just aligned itself. And not in every case it did. There was also, it wasn't automatically just because I was good at it, and automatically opened doors. A lot of times it was political and so on. But although I wasn't very interested in that side of the game. But to answer your questions, one day, this is back in I think it was late 70s, in Lake Elsinore, I wanted to play for the first time. I was new in the sport and only had a few years in, a couple hundred jumps or a few hundred jumps. And I wanted to play with the flash photography. And so I had a flash that actually mounted on top of the camera, just like on the hot shoe, and very fragile. I secured it as best as I could, and it was just powered by 4 AA batteries, which meant that recycling time was like 5 or 6 seconds between photos. It's not like you could just fire at will, and it didn't have a lot of power. But that's what I had, and I wanted to experiment and so on. And I went to the drops, and I knew they were going to be doing night jumps, and I just showed up, and it was already, dark and stuff, and I went to the manifest window. I said, I want to manifest for a night jump, but I'm looking for a group because I'm trying to experiment with this flash. So I'm looking to join somebody who's on the manifest or what's going on. And there was this girl that happened to be at manifest, and she just looked at me and her eyes lit up and were like, "Oh my God, you have a camera with a flash?" And I'm going like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Well, you're my new best friend." And he said, "We're looking for a photographer. We're trying to do a women's world record, night world record." And it was, at the time, I think it was only 15 ladies. And they was like, "So you're with us, and they had lost their photographer. The equipment broke or something earlier. I think it was Ray Cottingham that was going to shoot. All of a sudden, there I was, not only had a load to shoot, but I was like shooting a world record, formation bigger than my flash could even handle. But I was just out there to go to experiment and to do that. And I remember clearly being very conscious about my recycling time on the flash. So I had to shoot a couple of pictures and then kind of just wait. So I wouldn't shoot, and then the formation would complete, typical, hold for a second while I didn't have a flash because it was recycling. So I just waited and waited and waited. And, when I thought the last person docked, then I fired and got the one picture, and it was a world record, and it ended up in the centerfold of Parachutist. And so all of a sudden, it's kind of like one of those things that you create, but it kind of happens to you, so that's kind of been my motto. It's like I always post that I'm lucky again, and people are like, "No, it's not luck. It's skill." It's like, yeah, I know, but it is luck too, So I am lucky also.
With Norman having lived such an incredible career, I didn't want to cut him short, so we've broken this interview into 2 parts. Join me next week with part 2 of my interview with Norman Kent as we explore the professional aspects of his skydiving life. Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening to the 20-Minute Call podcast. Please do follow us on your podcast app so you always have the latest episode, which is released every Monday. If you want to contact the team, our email address is podcast@beyondmarketing.xyz. This episode was edited and engineered by Garnet Znydrick of the YouTube channel Blue Skies Fun Days. Thanks for listening, and join us next week for our next episode.